Hello, I'm Rebecca Weber. You're watching Better for America, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, joining me today is Tom Homan and Jaeson Jones, two men who are true border intelligence experts. They have contributed to creating the most secure border in history under President Donald J. Trump. Tom Homan and Jaeson Jones hold crucial roles in the new, incredibly important network, Border 911. We're going to learn a lot more about Border 911. All of us here at AMAC think that this is an excellent network, a group that's going to do a tremendous amount of good. Their goal is to reveal what is really happening at our borders and in our communities, and what we, the people, can do to stop this humanitarian crisis. It is plaguing our communities. So, gentlemen, thank you to both of you for joining me and for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to be with you.
Excellent. Jaeson, I'll start with you. As a retired captain from the Texas Department of Public Safety's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Division, can you describe the challenges that you faced and then perhaps compare that to what is currently taking place in Texas at our southern border today?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Back prior to retiring in 2016, I was commanding the Texas Rangers Cross-Border Operations Center, known as the BSOC. And we were collaborating with U.S. intelligence agencies and members within the Mexican government to build programs to try to save lives of people in Mexico for Mexican citizens and migrants from these cartels and what they've evolved into, from organized crime into an insurgency, into terrorism, and then as we ultimately saw them and today as a parallel government. Now fast forward to where we are today, and that impact has now crossed from Mexico into the United States, far beyond just the cartel violence that we were trying to stop there before it impacted us, which we're now seeing at unprecedented levels as the cartels have weaponized fentanyl. But today, what we really see, that's what I call the quantum leap in failures, is this adjustment from human smuggling into the debt bondage and human trafficking of men, women, and children. As the Biden administration really opened up our borders, not only to U.S., Mexico, but to the world, the cartels saw a massive gap. And they said to themselves, for the first time, we can truly treat people as a commodity, meaning that, in the old days, Rebecca, they didn't care. If you crossed that river, they didn't care what part of the country you came from. It was about $100 to cross the river. Today, if you're a Mexican citizen, it's about $2,500. If you're a Central American, it's $3,000. If you are Chinese, it's $5,000. And if you're Russian or Middle Eastern, it is $9,000 just across the river in South Texas. And so that's why they put wristbands on men, women, and children. And I broke that story. So when you really peel back the onion, Tom and I, we talk about it all the time. I give him all the credit in the world because he's brought all these people together. But when you peel back that onion and you look at the breadth and scope of what we're facing, I say it all the time, and I mean this, that we're witnessing the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11.
Unbelievable. This is why it's important that we're talking about it. I want to shift over to you, Tom. You were acting director of ICE, and you see how the policies today that are in place are incentivizing illegal immigration, and it's not just impacting the border states, but the country as a whole. Can you share with us, tell our listeners a little bit about Border 911? We've had you on before, but we've got some new listeners. Just want to remind them what Border 911 is all about and why you formed it.
Well, look, I did work for President Trump. Look, I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. And I can tell you, after the success we had the Trump administration, no one can argue that under the Trump administration, we had the most secure border of my lifetime. And I worked for 6 presidents. Every president I worked for took steps to help secure the border because every president understood you can't have national security if you don't have border security. Every president, even Clinton, Obama, took steps to secure the border. But of course, no one did more than President Trump. But Joe Biden's the first president in United States history who came in office and unsecured the border. Think about it. He unsecured the most secure border we've had on purpose. The reason I created Border 911 after I retired, I just created this about 6 months ago, is because I wake up every day pissed off because we did have a secure border in President Trump. And this administration came in unsecured it. And when I created Border 911, I brought the team of the best experts. Again, I've done this for 34 years. I know who knows their stuff when it comes to the border. So I reached out to who I thought were the best border experts out there. I got Mark Morgan, was a prior commissioner of CBP under Trump. I got Jaeson Jones, who's on the show here with me today, who knows more about the criminal cartels and cross-border crime than anybody I've met in my career. I got Sarah Carter, who works for me with Fox News, and she spent 20 years as an investigative journalist. I got Victor Avila. Victor Avila is a senior special agent. He worked for me when I was the ICE director, and he's been assigned to our attaché offices in Central America and Mexico. So he knows about the cartel activity in Mexico. He actually him and his partner were ambushed by the Mexican drug cartel. His partner was killed, and even though Victor was shot several times, he survived. So I got the best border team in the world. And the reason I say that is because every podcast I do, I start talking about we're true experts. And I'm not, blowing my own horn. The bottom line is everybody in this team, except Sarah, because she's an investigative journalist, everybody on this team put handcuffs on people, enforced border security laws, investigated the criminal cartels, put people in prison. And many of us were part of the Trump administration who helped create the most secure border in my lifetime. That's why I say I have a team of experts. So I created Border 911 I want to spend the next year educating the American people on why border security matters. So when they get to that voting booth, they're going to vote for the person who's going to, guarantee to take actions to secure the border. And I say that because I go across the country. Me and Jaeson have done several events together. And I tell people all the time, regardless of your opinion of illegal immigration, because that's a very controversial issue, very emotional issue, regardless, let's put that aside. When an administration comes in, like this administration has, and created an historic illegal immigration crisis, it overwhelms the Border Patrol, where 70 to 90% of agents have been pulled off the line to process, which means 70 to 90% of agents are no longer on patrol doing their national security job. And when Border Patrol gets overwhelmed, and the criminal cartels, Jaeson will tell you, know exactly what they're doing. They decide who comes across and where they go across and what time they go across, because they'll send a large group to overwhelm the 30% of agents left on the line. And that's when they create gaps. That's when the fentanyl comes across. That's when the other drugs come across. That's when the gang members and criminals come across. That's when the no-inspector terrorists come across. That's when the sex trafficking and women and children come across. And all those things are historic highs. It's not a coincidence. In the same time period, you have historic illegal immigration that's overwhelmed the Border Patrol. They have historic sex trafficking in women and children, numbers we've never seen before. Historic drug flow, numbers like we've never seen before. We got 1.7 million known gotaways since Joe Biden's been president. 1.7 million. These are people that chose to pay more to the cartel, because you pay, Jason said, you pay an amount to the cartel to cross the river, across the desert, and turn yourself in. You pay a much higher amount if you want to get to Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, and not turn yourselves into Border Patrol. You got to ask yourself, why did 1.7 million people decide to pay more to get away? Why didn't they want to pay less, turn yourselves into Border Patrol, get processed, get released the same day, get flown to the city of their choice on taxpayers' money, get work authorization for the next 5 to 7 years while they fight their case? Why would you not take advantage of that free giveaway program? Why'd you pay more to get away?
Sure.
Because you don't want to be fingerprinted. You're carrying fentanyl. You're trafficking women and children.
Yeah.
You're known suspected terrorists. So people need to understand that this border security nightmare we're dealing with right now, Jaeson said, biggest national security failure in the country since 9/11. This is a huge national security issue because of the very fact we have 1.7 million gotaways. We don't know who they are or where they're from. However, we've arrested people from 171 different countries. Many of these countries are sponsors of terror. This administration, is just on the southern border alone, has arrested over 300 people off terrorist watch list since Joe Biden's been president. Almost twice as many of that on the northern border.
The numbers are staggering, and to realize that we've got a sitting U.S. president who is just turning a blind eye and almost denying what's happening before our very eyes, not addressing the fact that we're seeing, modern day slavery, child sex trafficking, things that are just unthinkable that they would ever happen here in America. There are so many threats, and we're here and doing this show today with you both to really bring light and shed light. Jaeson, you've managed, as you mentioned earlier, you managed the daily operations of the Texas Rangers Border Security Operations Center. how stretched are today's available resources, and what
Mm.
kind of impact is this having on the state of Texas first, and of course the nation as a whole? But how limited
Yeah.
are the folks down in Texas as they try to combat this?
Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star, this may stun some of your viewers. The state of Texas has invested $9 billion in border operations just under Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star. And I'll tell you, if you really look at what's happening to these people, these men and women, 12,000 strong National Guardsmen, all of 7,100 members of the Texas Department of Public Safety, not including the men and women of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Service, another state police service. It goes down to that border. These men and women, for almost 3 years, Rebecca, have been leaving their wives, their spouses, for 3 years for a week to 2 week operations away from their family. You know what they refer to it now as? Operation Imminent Divorce. They're exhausted. The state of Texas is exhausted. But now, with that being said, one thing that you really feel and you see it when you're amongst these men and women, and it makes me very proud. I was with Lieutenant Chris Olivetis last week on the border in McAllen, and I sat down with him because we learned that just the Texas Department of Public Safety, which is one agency of 2,600 under this operation, have rescued 900 unaccompanied children from stash houses and from bailout operations where they're in these vehicles. And it all came about, I ended up asking the question on an interview, because a trooper had just stopped a vehicle driven by a Texas Tango Blast, which is a gang member in Texas, a Tier 1 gang. He had a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old with no family. And it turned into understanding the breadth and scope of how these children are under the care, custody, and control of gang members who are then taking them all across the country. Those children, Rebecca, were being taken to California. This is what we're up against.
If anybody listening doesn't feel angered, you got to re-examine the data and the facts here, and we should all feel, a righteous anger rising up.
Yeah.
Something has got to be done. It's people who can turn this thing around. It's people who got us to the secure border that we ever had in the history of my lifetime, and certainly I think in over decades. And it will be people that turn it around and fix it. But we can't ignore it. 900 children rescued. That is astonishing. Thank God for those few good people. And there are many. There are hundreds. There are thousands of people, amazing people, who are putting their lives on the line in order to help others. So this is just so important. Tom, we see a huge influx in encounters. We were just speaking before the show about the bridge that's closed down there in Texas because there's so many people coming over. This is unprecedented. What are some of the underreported issues in border security that you think needs more public attention and that Border 911 will surely bring to light?
Well, again, first of all, let me foot stomp what Jaeson just told you. Since Joe Biden's taken the White House, we've had over 360,000 children come across that border. 360,000 children. This administration released them to so-called sponsors they supposedly vetted. They can't find nearly 100,000 children. They can't find them. They released them to sponsors. Now they lost track of them. They can't find them. And let me tell you something. Based on my 34 years experience in the numerous child trafficking investigations I have conducted, the 100,000 children, many of those children right now are living with pedophiles. They're in forced labor. They'll be in pornographic movies. These children are living a life of hell because this administration, number one, refuses to secure the border. We gave them the game plan how to do it. They have the Trump policy. They have the plan. All they got to do is they can put the Remain in Mexico program back in place tomorrow. The highest course of land that says legal. But because they have this open border and refuse to do anything to slow the flow, nearly 100,000 children have been let in this country, released to people without proper vetting, and now we can't find them. For instance, ICE recently, in the last 2 months, ICE has opened up 3 different investigations where they found children in forced labor as young as 9 years old cleaning up entrails at a meatpacking plant in the midnight shift. These children are living a life of hell. And while you and I and Jaeson are talking here right now, while we're talking, women are being raped by the criminal cartels. While we're talking, women are being sexually assaulted numerous times. A child's going to die today on that border. So this isn't just, talking points. And people need to understand what's happening right now as we speak. is women are being sexually assaulted. Children are going to die. Children are going to be sexually assaulted. So this is the biggest humanitarian crisis this country's ever seen. And what's most terrible about it is that they can stop it. Then they can secure the border. Secretary Mayorkas was a deputy secretary in 2014 and 2015. Joe Biden was vice president in 2014, 2015. We had a family surge. Do you know how we shut it down? We built family detention centers. We detained them long enough to see a judge. 9 out of 10 don't qualify for asylum. We put them on an airplane and sent them home. Mayorkas was deputy secretary at the time. Biden was vice president. What are they doing now? They're not detaining them. They're not seeing a judge, and no one's being removed. They're doing complete opposite of what they know works. So that's why I've called for the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas, and Joe Biden should be following right behind him. This is a self-made crisis that is costing lives every day, and not just migrant lives. Since Joe Biden's been in office, over 1,700 migrants have died on U.S. soil. That's not counting 112,000 overdose deaths of fentanyl. Joe Biden's policies are killing Americans. They're killing migrants at record numbers. This administration has done a single thing to slow the flow. Only thing they do is send more resources to the border, process quicker, release quicker, because all they care about is the optics. If people don't see overcrowding, there's nothing to see. The border secure. You don't see any overcrowding. Only thing they have done is make it easier to cross and make it easier to be released. What's happening on our southern border and northern border, crossings on the northern border up over 800%. This isn't mismanagement. This isn't incompetence. This is by design. Joe Biden ran an open borders. I wrote an op-ed for Fox News 6 months before the election. I said, if Joe Biden becomes president, we lose the border. Just based on what he was promising. When you promise people to enter the country legally, you won't be detained. I'm going to have an embassy program. I'm going to have a DACA program. I'm going to put a moratorium on all deportations, and I'm going to give you free health care. When you make those type of promises to the world, the most vulnerable people are going to sell everything they have, give it to the cartels that come to the greatest nation on earth, only to lose it all. So look, this is by people. American people need to understand. They destroyed our border on purpose. This is by design.
He needs to be fired. Yeah, Biden and the rest of the Mayorkas, they need to get out. Now, Jaeson, you're a retired captain from the Texas Department of Public Safety Intelligence and Counterterrorism Division, and you've supervised human intelligence operations in multiple nations, including the longest 24/7 border operation in Texas history. That was Operation Secure Texas. The current administration clearly is not doing all they can to go after Mexican cartels, right? They're clearly not, because they're letting them in. What are the threats posed by this transnational crime? What are the real threats?
It is a great question. It is a great question. And it is exactly why I retired and I went public immediately, trying to get them designated as foreign terrorist organizations. I started that initiative in 2016 because what I understood very clearly after working with U.S. intelligence agencies and pushing actionable intelligence to save people who are about to be chopped up into pieces by the Los Zetas, one of the most hyper-violent cartels in Mexico, is that this machine had spun completely out of control as they were conducting mass murders of migrants and Mexican citizens. I worked the 72 migrants massacred in San Fernando, the 300 men, women, and children who were cut into pieces and then guisoed in Allende by the Los Zetas. So as we saw this evolution, what I learned very clearly is that they had gone far beyond organized crime, and that the terrorist acts that they were committing were going to come here, because we began seeing it with beheadings in the United States, which we worked. And I could go on and on. So what I understood is that our system, the National Incident-Based Reporting System and the Uniform Crime Report under the FBI, did not capture transnational crime, and that it was already impacting our citizens. And so the goal right there was to stop the synergy between the Halcon network, which had the operational control. Those are the scouts, the lookouts that move commodities in and out of the United States. They truly have operational control. It's called the Halcon network, who work side by side with the alien smuggling organizations, the drug traffickers, U.S.-based street gangs, Tier 1 gangs, and long-haul smugglers. Now, today, what has happened under the Biden administration is now you can overlay that with all the countries that Tom just talked about, the 171 that are now coming. This synergy that is created by these cartels, because everyone knows in the underworld, If you want to get a commodity into the United States, you go through the cartels. That makes them the synergy for the problems we have. And if we, as the United States government, Mexico, and a global coalition of partners leveraging what we call the Unified Command can collaborate, build those relationships, and absolutely crush them, we know what we have to do. But Rebecca, I will tell you right now, if we don't get the authorities and we continue to use a 60-year failed model of a law enforcement investigative model, we will never fix this problem. And there are those of us like Tom Homan and the men and women of Border 911 that understand this. And this is why if we can just, one of the things that I do, and Tom will tell you, is I'm a big believer that I don't have to sell the border. None of us do. If the American public could see what we see, and this is why we live by a real simple motto: illuminate it to eliminate it. If you see what we see, none of us are okay with it. I don't care if you're left, right, up, or down. But we've got to get to those people, and we've also got to get these authorities. And then the last thing you're going to want to be on planet Earth is a cartel member, because the world's best of the best are coming for them.
Wow. My goodness. Tom, do you see any advancements in technology having a great impact on the role of local law enforcement? Are there any emerging technologies that could help combat some of these threats, border violence, I suppose? Because I guess, you know, the reason why I asked that question is because I'm thinking, what is and also maybe a follow-up question, what is the Biden administration doing that's tying our hands from being able to address the problem in the first place? And then are there technologies that might help as a workaround, since we've got a sitting president who doesn't seem to really want to take up the matter at all?
Well, first, let me just add to what Jaeson just said. Jaeson was exactly right. People need to see what's happening on the southern border. They need to see the atrocities I've seen. They need to see what me and Jaeson have seen that keep us up at night. The terrible things I've seen throughout my career. And I won't go into it here, but if people saw what we saw, if they wore our shoes for the last 3 decades, they'd be raising hell too. And what Border 911 is going to do, we're about ready to kick off a live show. Well, we're going to go to Jaeson in the field. They're going to see what Jaeson sees. They're going to go to me where I'm at, see what I see. So American people, through our live Border 111 Live, are going to actually see what we see. And I guarantee you, once they see it, you have more people screaming and yelling to do something about the border. As far as technology, yeah, this emerging technology is always helpful with border security. But I'll say this, the biggest issue on the border is not resources. Do we need more border patrol agents? Yeah, they always come in handy. But is that the problem? No. It's a problem, more technology? No. This is a policy issue. A policy issue. Again, we had illegal immigration down 83 to 90%, and it was based on policies. The Remain in Mexico program. People can still claim asylum, but since we know, based on 10 years of court data, 9 out of 10 don't qualify, they'll get order removed. That's why we don't release them in the country due to the Remain in Mexico program. They stop coming. When people realize that we're going to be caught and released in the United States to go into the wind, 9 out of 10 lose their case to get order removed, but they never leave because they go into the wind. They hide out long enough for the next amnesty to come along. What Trump did there was an out-of-box thinking. That was a game changer. Remain in Mexico. People still claim asylum, but you're going to wait in Mexico. And if you don't win, guess what? We don't have to go find you. The third safe country agreement said if you really escape from fear and persecution, asylum says this: you claim asylum if you are escaping fear and persecution from your home government, because your race, religion, political affiliation, or participation in a specific social group. That's what that is what asylum is. Well, President Trump said, "Well, look, wait. So if you actually leave Honduras and you get to Mexico, have you not escaped that so-called fear of persecution? You left the country." Of course. So he made the three Central American countries, Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, along with Mexico, agree that if you get the first three countries you come to, that's where you should claim asylum. If this is really about asylum and escaping fear and persecution, you did that. Claim asylum there. But it isn't about that. This is about getting to the United States, because clearly, as I said 100 times, 9 out of 10 people don't qualify. This is about getting to the United States. So the biggest way to fix this issue is policy change. Put the Remain in Mexico program back in. Put the third safe country agreements back in. Continue building the wall. Now, people say, well, the walls, that's Trump's vanity project. No, A wall was something the Border Patrol's been wanting for decades. President Trump listened to the experts. He called me up and asked me my opinion on things all the time. He talked to people who did this for decades. Border Patrol said we need a wall. And the wall isn't end all to be all. There's certain young guys can get over that wall. But guess what? When you climb that wall, we know. When you dig under that wall, we know. Because it's a smart wall with technology. I'm not going to get into technology because it's law enforcement sensitive. But the wall is mainly for this. It slows people down, gives Border Patrol time to respond. And also for the most vulnerable people, the women and children who can't get over that wall, it funnels them to an area there's not a wall. And guess what's waiting for them? The United States Border Patrol. For number one, to deal with the humanitarian issue, because a lot of these people are very sick when they show up. So we deal with their health and safety first. So the walls save lives. So get back to building the wall. So technology is always good. There's a lot of technology, latest drone technology, wiretap, trying to tap into the cartels. And Jaeson can speak more about this, about how we need to chase the money of the cartels. And Jaeson, why don't you add about the technology that'd be very useful for taking these cartels down? You know this better than I do. So, I think technology becomes very useful in investigating the cartels, getting to their money, getting to their command and control structure, and taking them apart. Jason, can you speak to that real quick?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. The reason the authorities that we're talking about with the terrorism designation are so important is because when you look at the structure of each of these cartels, they're different. And to go after them, we're talking about utilizing what we call network theory. Some are built like a hub, a spoke, a wheel, or a mesh network. And Rebecca, that tells you how you go after them. And so you upload a lot of this data, number of contacts, key points, key players, et cetera, assets, and all of these things. And it will actually show you what we call the key nodes. So when you talk about disrupting and taking down these organizations globally, you can literally go in and take out these key nodes, and internally they will dissolve themselves. Now, there's a lot to that we never talk about publicly, but most Americans think, or they hear the word getting the terrorism designation, immediately they think of the military dropping bombs, and that's what that means. In 2023, leveraging this kind of technology that helps us conduct network theory to go after them and completely disrupt them, we do it in that model. And now, don't get me wrong, I want to be very clear so everyone understands. You can't even fly over the Sierra Mountains right now in Mexico where the bosses all live, from Sinaloa all the way down into Jalisco, because they will shoot you out of the sky with surface-to-air missiles. This is how advanced they have become. So we're going to have to leverage the full scope tools of national power in this country, from NSA all the way to U.S. intelligence agencies. But it is going to be a complete collaborative approach, because with the terrorism designation, there are three authorities that we really will leverage hard. First is you can't be in the United States because if you're a terrorist, right, we can get them out of the country. Many of them, Rebecca, are here on visas because, remember, they have money. They can afford to get visas to be in the United States. This is going to allow us to spin up very rapidly, very quickly, and get them out of our country instead of working 2-year cases. So we're putting speed into the system. Second, you always hear from these so-called experts who've never built programs to go after assets and money that conduct follow the money investigations, right? We've been hearing that on national television for decades. What this will allow us to do outside the boundaries of Fourth Amendment in the United States is to go after their assets real time, seize their money, and take away their operational abilities. And third and final, very big one, is the ability to limit their mobility globally. Remember, if you're a terrorist, you can't fly and work in Australia, Europe, Russia, and all the other countries are working in. So we're going to limit that mobility. So what are we doing? We're taking everything from them. We're isolating them, and then we are crushing them, leveraging all the partners and the abilities of this government and many governments around the world. That's how we win.
So, Jaeson, what is your take on why leadership, Joe Biden, Mayorkas, why they are not in support of taking a harder stance, securing our border, protecting Americans, reducing the number of deaths, eliminating fentanyl, getting it off the streets? Why? So many people ask that question. And too often they think, well, maybe it's not as bad as people are telling me, otherwise they would do something. Surely that's the case, right? We know that's not the case. We know that they know how bad it is, and they still turn a blind eye. What do you think is behind that
And
motivation?
as Tom said, and I'll reiterate this, he's right. And not only that, they're the causation of this. I will tell you, as somebody, I've been the guy that goes to your house, knocks on your door, Rebecca, and tells you the person you love the most in the world is never coming home because they died of fentanyl or they died of some other type of drug. I was a narcotics agent for many, many years. And let me tell you, if you want to be humbled in your life, tell a family that that's going to happen. And if you look at what's taking place in the United States right now, 300 families on average per day from the fentanyl crisis in this country are going to get that knock at the door. So this is no joke. And how you can be, I mean, we have gone, to answer your question, we have gone so far beyond a left and a right issue. The ideology has taken over at a maddening level. And when Tom mentioned earlier that we had lost 111,877 Americans from May of 22 to May of 23, do you know why I'm only giving you data from May to May? Because we're losing so many Americans to deadly fentanyl. The pathologists don't even have the ability to send up the lab results to CDC because we're 6 to 9 months behind. We have never been where we are right now. And I will tell you as someone, and I truly believe this to the core of who I am, at this point, as much as Tom and I travel every week around the country briefing families and briefing people, in the North, they really feel this impact from the overdose crisis in this country, poisonings really. And I believe that it's going to be that crisis that gets us the terrorism designation. It's going to be that crisis that truly fixes what's happening in Mexico and at our border.
We can only pray. Before I let both of you run, and I know how busy you are, we so appreciate you both. Tom, share a little bit about what motivates you in your daily efforts, and then, if any young person is listening and they're thinking of getting involved in border security, law enforcement, what advice might you give them?
Well, I knew I was always going to be a cop, right? My dad was a cop. My grandpa was a cop. So I started my career as a police officer in New York. Then I joined the United States Border Patrol in 1984. And look, it's a great career, right? I was in the Border Patrol. I went from a frontline Border Patrol agent to being the director of ICE. So I climbed the ladder, hitting every rung. And my proudest accomplishment in my entire career is I'm the first acting director of ICE that actually came up through the ranks. I had the 20,000 men and women that worked for me. I didn't ask them to do a single thing that I didn't do myself through my career. So that's the proudest moment. So look, a career in law enforcement, I happen to think law enforcement is probably the finest 1% this country has, because when everybody's running away from danger, they're running to it. They save lives. The Border Patrol has already saved thousands of lives. I've seen Border Patrol agents jump in the river. They got 60 pounds of gear on. You add their vests and their gun and other equipment, a minimum of 60 pounds of gear. These men and women are hopping into the river to save people at great risk of their own. And these are truly American heroes. Law enforcement, Border Patrol, they're our frontline defense. I started in Border Patrol. I got a special place in my heart for them. So God bless each and every one of them. So a career in Border Patrol is a great career. You can be saving a lot of lives, protecting this country in law enforcement alone. So anybody that's interested in law enforcement, I think is a righteous thing to do. You're not going to get rich, but you're going to go home every day with a full heart that you've done something to protect your community, protect this nation. And what keeps me motivated every day is what me and Jaeson been talking about. Look, throughout my career, I stood in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead migrants who suffocated to death, who were baked to death because the smuggler didn't care. He just wanted the money. So a kid like me that grew up in a small town in upstate New York, I grew up milking cows, and now I'm standing in the back of a tractor trailer with 19 dead people at my feet, including a 5-year-old little boy who suffocated to death. That changed the man who I was today. Then I went to Phoenix, Arizona to run Operation Ice Storm, where, as Jaeson was telling you, criminal cartels, these smuggling organizations, they're ruthless, they're animals. So if an alien couldn't pay a smuggling fee, they call the relatives up on the phone, and their relatives will listen while their relatives getting tortured, getting cut up, getting stabbed until they came up with the fees. And so the bodies are piling up there. I've talked to young girls as young as 9 years old that were raped multiple times by the criminal cartels. And as a man, I think I'm a pretty tough guy, but when you look into a little girl's eyes that's 9 years old, and there's all sense of humanity has been stolen from her, her world is a dark place. She's never going to be the same. And she's one out of so many. And I wake up every morning thinking, how many little girls got raped last night? How many women got raped? How many people died last night crossing this border? How many, just like Jaeson said, how many parents got that phone call that your child was poisoned with fentanyl? Because most of these kids that die of fentanyl, they don't even know they're taking fentanyl. They think they're taking something to keep them up to take an exam the next day, to keep them awake or helping them sleep. So what gets me going is the tragedies I've seen in 34 years made the man I am today. And when under Trump administration, when you have secure borders save lives, the wall saves lives. So when you have an administration come in and purposely unsecure the border, it's going to cause death. It's going to cause the attacks on women and children and more sex trafficking. That's what keeps me going because I know how to stop this. We did it. And this administration came in and they start, like I said, no one cheered more for President Biden to become president than the criminal cartels in Mexico because they knew the money's coming. Record amount of money smuggling aliens, record amount of money sex trafficking women and children, record amount of money with the drug flow. That's why Jaeson would tell you that the violence in Mexico is so bad right now because the cartels are fighting each other over control of the plazas because there's so much money being made. So that's what keeps me going. It's the 34 years of the terrible things I've seen, knowing that we can stop it. So that's what Border 911 is all about. Educate the American people. Vote for the guy who's going to secure the border and save lives. So less children get sexually assaulted, less women and children get sex trafficked, less fentanyl gets in this country to kill Americans, less known suspected terrorists don't make it in this country. That's what keeps me going because I love this country. And I tell you right now, this is not the country I grew up in. I don't recognize this country
Certainly
anymore.
not. I mean,
I think there's one guy. I think there's one guy running for president that will give us the country that we want. And look, I promise President Trump, he comes back, I come back.
That's right.
And that.
But you're so right. I just want to mention, Tom, you're so right. It was a different world that we lived in. When I was 9 years old, I jumped on my bicycle and I pedaled around for a mile in a mile's distance with a friend, another 9-year-old girl, and we were safe. We were, and you're never safe all the time everywhere, but it was a different world. It was a different community, a different neighborhood that children are growing up in today. And suddenly it will all change, and the youth will say, "How did this happen?" Well, if we ignore this issue and we don't do what's right, things will only get worse. Jaeson, final question for you. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
That's one thing. We're at a turning point right now. If we don't take back the White House, I don't think we can fix it.
Yes.
I think another 4 years will be unfixable. This keeps me up at night. So I just want to throw that out to you. We always
it's true. There's
most important election. No. This election in 2024 is going to define what this country is. Because another 4 years with this administration, I don't think we can fix it after that.
Well, I've got hope yet. Jaeson, so many people listening, our AMAC members especially, think, boy, what can we do as members of our community to help combat the largest, as you put it, U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11? What should members of the community do?
Get involved in whatever way that is. One thing is that their congressmen and their senators have to know that they are not okay with what's been taking place and that they demand action. Tom and I talk about this quite often because if we don't get these tools and authorities that we need, we're never going to be able to fix this problem. And that's why we've got to get one of the things that really has happened here. And Tom will tell you, because he and I have briefed countless state reps, state senators, U.S. congressmen, U.S. senators together privately. One of the things we have found that would stun many Americans is that they don't know. If you're on the left, you listen to CNN to get your intelligence. If you're on the right, you watch Fox News. And that upsets me because I'm a Newsmax, but beyond that, but they have to understand what we are up against. And what we have found is that they truly are not being briefed. The U.S. intelligence agencies don't brief them. Ask Tom, the very first thing I ask them now publicly, I say to them before I say anything, when was the last time you were briefed, either classified or unclassified, by U.S. intelligence agencies or federal law enforcement on the cartels and their operations? You would be stunned at what we're hearing. So we've got to get them up to speed. The American public has to demand action. And once we get it, get ready. I would tell you to tell the American people to get tough because we're going to need their support. And the men and women of law enforcement at local, state, federal, Department of Defense, and U.S. intelligence agencies and partners all around the world are going to need their support and backing because this fight, it's no joke. I know these individuals very well. These are killers, Rebecca. They go through basic, intermediate, and advanced training from former special forces all over the world. We're going to be in a fight with these cartels and those who work with them, which includes Middle East terrorist organizations, and God help them because we're coming for them.
Tom Homan, Jaeson Jones, two American heroes. God bless you both. Thank you for all of the great work you do, for your time here today, and God be with you both. We need you so badly.
You as well. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to everyone out there listening, be sure to like and share this podcast so that more people know about AMAC. You can get involved. Go to amac.us. Be sure to join or renew your membership for $16. There's so much that we're doing for you, fighting for you. We are the voice of mature conservative Americans, the fastest growing conservative organization in America. Thank you for joining me today, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next time. Dental savings for AMAC members. Are you tired of sky-high dental bills? Introducing Key Dental Plan, your passport to saving up to 60% on all dental care. From routine checkups to major procedures, Key Dental Plan has you covered with exclusive discounts that keep your money where it belongs, in your wallet. With over 200,000 in-network dentists, Key Dental has you covered. Call now to unlock your key to affordable smiles. Call them at 1-800-539-5586. Visit us online at keydentalplans.com/AMAC because your smile deserves the best.